Greater Sandton and beyond. Get ready for the Sandton Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour. It's edition 186. It's week 11 of 2025. And if you want to catch the show outside of our usual FM broadcast, well, you can do so by checking out the podcast on all leading digital audio channels, including Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Podcast Party, Iono FM, and so many more. I'm Alexander Leibner, and welcome to everyone listening for the very first time. Pull up a chair, join us for the next hour on the Sandton Times Hour, and make yourself comfortable. And if you're listening online or on air, as well as our Sandton Times following in Johannesburg and Pretoria, across South Africa and everywhere else in the world. Yes, we have quite a few listeners in Nigeria, Qatar, New Zealand, Australia, Germany, the UK, the United States. Everyone checking in on Sandton. It's great to have you there. Well, wherever you are, I'm happy to report that, things are okay in Sandton land this week. If you've been following the news this past week in Sandton, has been somewhat lively. And a couple of one unfortunate incident that took place, but we're going to get into that in just a bit. Before we do that, I would like to hear from you. So if you'd like to get in touch and send through your questions or your comments or your feedback, you can do so by emailing editor@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media at Sandton Times and also hop onto the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And also don't forget to save our exclusive WhatsApp number for the Sandton Times, 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866, 084 726 3866. And feel free to send through your voice notes, text messages, or whatever else comes to mind. And Vincenzo, good to have you behind the mixing desk again. Ciao. And should we have a quick look back at the diary of this past week? No, I hasn't been too busy. But where have we been? What have we been up to? Well, Come Dine With Me launched its 10th season in Bryanston this week, which if you're a big fan of the show, and it seems like a lot of people are, they were saying it's one of the highest rated shows on television in South Africa, and that's why they keep bringing it back. They definitely had a fun event, and this highly anticipated season, I think, is going to be great. And I managed to walk away with a bit of a prize, believe it or not, Vincenzo, for my pretty good impression of David Lamb. And if you don't know who David Lamb is the legendary spicy voiceover of the show. And a lot of people would argue, well, if it wasn't for his voice and his comments, would the show really be as good as it is? And I gave it a shot. And if you want to have a listen of my version of it, it's up on the Sandton Times Instagram Reels page. And let me know. Did it get it right? Is David still king of Come Dine With Me? Or is there a contender? Well, we're going to hopefully find out from you. Love to hear what you're thinking. Also, MC declined breakfast for Oracle, which was very interesting. And I also had a chance to meet up with former Miss South Africa, Natasha Joubert, ahead of her wedding day. And she launched a new range of ladies' clothing with Forever New. And Natasha looked and came across fabulous as always. And of course, we wish her all the very best for her special day and for the new chapter that she's about to step into. But back to business at hand. Who are we talking to this week, or what are we talking about this week? Well, in it, I'll be trying to make sense of this horrendous scene that we saw outside of a Sandton restaurant this week, which left 3 people dead and 4 injured. I mean, we're talking to a security expert to give us a bit more insight and understanding as to what happened on the streets of Sandton this past week. Then we take a look at one of the oldest and boldest instruments out there, the organ, and one in particular that is celebrating an anniversary at a private school in Johannesburg, and I'd like you to stay listening for that. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. And finally, we bring in a bit of motoring as an iconic brand made its return to South Africa, and I had a chance to chat to their chief designer, the man behind the designing of the car, and what went into it. So all this and more in the next hour.
Show some love.
subscribe, share,
Leave a review and rating for the Sandton Times Hour
on your favorite podcast app now.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So this past week, popular restaurant Solo in Sandton, situated at 24 Central, became the scene of a deadly shootout, which left 3 people dead and 4 injured. And among the injured were 2 bystanders, a security guard from the restaurant and a community policing forum member. And he was on duty at the time. And the 3 deceased individuals have been identified as a man and his 2 bodyguards. and police are now investigating the motive, with reports suggesting that an altercation broke out from a dispute over the establishment's no firearm policy, and authorities seized multiple firearms, including 2 AK-47 rifles at the scene, and no arrests have been made as investigations continue. But here to discuss this matter with me is Chad Thomas. He's a private investigator with IRS Forensic Investigations. And Chad, thank you for joining me on the Sandton Times Hour.
Hi, Alexander, and hi to the listeners.
Now, Chad, just to clarify this from the beginning, you don't have any personal or professional involvement in this case per se?
Actually, we do.
Okay.
The deceased in this has been a person of interest in a murder for hire case that we've been investigating for quite some time now. We were very surprised by these developments because he has been on the radar of the authorities for quite some time. In fact, he was charged in a similar matter last year in January, where people were injured in a shootout that involved himself. He was charged for attempted murder there, and that case was provisionally withdrawn. During last year, there was also a warrant of arrest issued for him in a fraud matter from Nigel, and he's never been very far from controversy. So despite the fact that the authorities knew about this individual, he's been able to continue operating in plain sight. And this, of course, brings about a myriad of concerns in respect to the way criminals have become so emboldened in South Africa.
Well, let's maybe go into those concerns.
So one of the greatest concerns we have is that we've seen an emergence of bad actors establishing or buying existing security companies. And they buy these security companies for a number of reasons. And the one reason is that if it's an existing security company with all the correct registration in place, code of body, institution number, that company may come with weapons. And it's a very easy way for criminals or bad actors to have proxies or people acting in the front for them to buy these companies to have access to legitimate weapons, to then brand vehicles as security vehicles, which may not necessarily be stopped and searched by the authorities. They could actually evade detection by driving through roadblocks. And this has been an emerging problem we've seen throughout South Africa. It started off in KwaZulu-Natal, where taxi bosses were buying security companies. Those security companies would then fight proxy wars on their behalf. And then it became an issue where they saw that they could monetize this even further by hiring out these izinkabi, which is the colloquial term in South Africa for hitmen, to other people for business, to settle business disputes. So we've seen people traveling from KZN into other provinces to commit hits that actually work purportedly for legitimate security companies carrying legitimate firearms. And this is a major, major problem.
So we talk about security companies. We're talking about not necessarily the guards that you have at office parks or people who are patrolling suburbs. These are the sort of close proximity bodyguard, personal security businesses. Is that sort of what we're looking at?
Security, by definition, includes a lot of industries that have been amalgamated into one under the control of one regulator. So in 2001, the Private Security Industry Regulation Act came into effect, which established SIRA, which is the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority. Prior to that, in 1987, the Security Officers Board was established through the Security Officers Act, and it basically only covered the aspects that we know as traditional security. A security officer at a gate, at a boom, conducting what we call access and egress control, patrols of a facility, etc. 2001, when the new act came into effect, a whole lot of other types of services were included in the act. Private investigations were added in the act, the supply of a locksmith service, installing of burglar proofing, installing of alarm systems, cameras, that type of thing was included in the act. Event security, close protection was included in the act, along with armed response and other things. So it's a very broad act. It's a very important piece of legislation. As I said, it established SIRA. It established an inspectorate within SIRA to be able to monitor the industry. But what people didn't take into consideration was the exponential growth in security in South Africa. It's become the single biggest employer in the private sector. It replaced mining more than 2 decades ago as being the biggest employer in South Africa. There's about 2.2 million people registered on the database of SIRA as being registered security officers, of which around 700,000 people are active. This means that this massive organization, which is bigger than our military, our police force, and our correctional services combined, has to be correctly regulated. And it is regulated. And SIRA is the regulator, and they're trying their best to regulate this mammoth organization. One of the other problems we're seeing, though, is that the police have become very reliant on security companies. There's a project called E2, which stands for Eyes and Ears, which was a very forward-thinking project, which brought the security industry into alignment with the police to assist the police as force multipliers on the ground. So the police have become very reliant on security companies, and so has Suburbia. Suburbia has outsourced the patrolling of their streets, etc., to security companies. So it's a problem now that these force multipliers that are meant to be working with the police have got so many bad actors working against the police, working against SIRA, that are now involved in these criminal activities.
This is the Sandton Times Hour, and I'm in conversation with Chad Thomas, a private investigator with IRS Forensic Investigations. We're chatting about the shootout that took place in Sandton at a restaurant called Solo at 24 Central. We're going to take a quick break and more on this conversation right after this.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
Chatting to Chad Thomas, a private investigator with IRS Forensic Investigations, providing us with a perspective from his side on the security industry and, of course, this particular incident. And before the break, Chad, we were chatting about this close proximity security industry that we have, and also how this has absolutely boomed, and especially in Sandton, if you spend a lot of time, and this has become more and more of a thing that I've noticed, that you have more and more people either walking around with 10 people the size of a cupboard, sort of protecting them. If you're in Sandton City, there was, I think it was towards the end of last year, an incident with two individuals and their security teams getting into a bit of a heated fight in Diamond Walk, which luckily didn't end in any sort of tragedy, but still it trended online with people taking some videos. You do see people driving around Sandton with big cars, black cars, tinted windows, some sort of lighting. And I suppose the question comes up now, where do you draw the line between being a security versus actually being some sort of law enforcement?
Yeah, it's a massive problem that we've seen. The increase in close protection and bodyguards and convoys and they're not even convoys, they're cavalcades. They're huge. In some instances, they rival that of the president. Guys with, as we call MIBs, men in black, walking around with semi-automatic rifles. And you don't know if it's a politician, you don't know if it's the police, you don't know if it's a private security company, you don't know what's going on. These guys have become bullies on the road. They've got white strobe lights. They drive through robots. They force other cars off the road. It's an incredible situation. And if you speak to these businessmen that make use of that, they're going to tell you that, well, South Africa is dangerous. There's a lot of extortion that's taking place. There's murder for hire that's taking place to settle business disputes. Kidnap for ransom has become a massive problem in South Africa. But that doesn't justify what we're seeing. What we're seeing are not true close protection officers, because true close protection officers blend in. They're not going to be these guys, bulky, black suits with firearms in full display. They're not going to be pushing people out the way. They're not going to be wanting to draw attention through to their principal. And I think it comes down to ego. In a lot of instances, people want these cavalcades of vehicles. They think that they're on the same level as the president. They want to have these bodyguards fighting these proxy wars from them. I remember being called out to the International Convention Center in Sandton a couple of years ago. It was a very affluent wedding that was taking place within the Muslim community. And two very well-known Muslim businessmen were present at this wedding, and they were in a civil dispute with one another over the sale of a building. And the one got the other's bodyguards to attack each other. So they had this proxy fight take place in the foyer of the ICC, where they got their two groups of bodyguards to physically fight it out. It's absolutely pathetic to think people can conduct themselves in such a way. One of those very same businessmen at a stage was accused of using his bodyguards to go out and harass somebody in Northwest Province and actually force a car off the road and shoots at the occupants of the car. So these guys are not being used in the true sense of the word of close protection. They're not being used to bodyguard people who are at risk. They're being used to fight proxy battles. They're being used to intimidate. They're being used as bullies, and they're being used to inflate the egos of certain business people. And it's a massive, massive concern, because there are legitimate close protection officers out there that are making a living, that are getting a bad reputation as a result of other bad actors in the industry not actually having a clue what close protection is really about.
Now, the reason why we talk about all of this is that as the reports go, the reason for this shootout taking place is that the principal in this particular instance and the deceased arrived at this restaurant with his two bodyguards, supposedly armed, and there seemed to have been a dispute. And I'm not quite sure how it got to a point where it escalated so intensely that they ended up having a shootout and 3 people ended up losing their lives. Does this seem like a feasible or like a reasonable narrative or story that something like this could have happened?
I must be honest with you, there's a number of narratives doing the rounds. And without wanting to get involved with speculation or conjecture, I'm going to speak to the facts. The person who was the purported principal, Bongani, is controversial. Stories that are circulating at the moment, and again, not to want to get involved with the conjecture, but to look at what's circulating, is that there was more to the story than meets the eye, that he may have been there to enforce a so-called debt that was owed to him, that this got out of control. The authorities were called. They thought that the situation had been neutralized. Obviously, it hasn't. And then the shootout ensued. But again, if the authorities had been called out and they were present, it just shows you the level of how emboldened criminals can be to actually engage in a shootout with police officers present with no care for those around. And of the 7 people that were shot, 3 of which died, 2 of the people that didn't die, thank God, were civilians. So where do we get this sense of emboldenment from? Is it as a result of the fact that we've got so little consequences or accountability? Is it the fact that he got away with the shooting at Tempos in January of 2024? Is it the fact that he had been on the radar for an alleged murder for hire for quite some time now and could see that the system wasn't getting to him? So this speaks to a massive problem, not just in respect of people carrying firearms in the open and abusing the use of so-called bodyguards or close protection officers. It talks to a situation where the state isn't capacitated to fully investigate these bad actors and to put these bad actors out of operation. A guy like this should have been in prison. A guy like this should not have been walking the streets armed to the hilt.
Well, certainly a story and a picture that is not going to be going away anytime soon in Sandton. As I said, if you spend any time in Sandton, you will see a lot of this kind of movement happening, especially dark cars with all kinds of flashing lights. Or if you go to any of the shopping malls, if you've got some high-profile individuals or individuals who feel like they need the security, they'll be roaming around these shopping malls. And certainly this kind of situation is not something that you want to have playing out in a public space. Chad Thomas, a private investigator with IRS Forensic Investigations. Thank you for joining me on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you, Alex. I love your professionalism and thank you for having me on.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
So taking into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, my name is Alexander Leipner, and if there's anything that sounded interesting to you this week, but you didn't get all the details, you didn't have a chance to jot it down, well, don't panic, don't be upset. You can hop onto the Sandton Times' website, sandtontimes.co.za, and go look at the show notes for this week, and we have all the details on there with breakdowns, further information, further reading, further links, ways for you to get more information, all on the website right there. Of course, also you can connect on the social media accounts at Sandton Times, and also feel free to use the WhatsApp number for this show, 084 Sandton, and that's 084 726 3866, and save it on your phone and feel free to use that to send your voice notes, text messages, and so much more. And of course, that number is exclusive to the Sandton Times. Use it for future reference. Now, we're going to be chatting about something slightly unusual. It's not something that you talk about every single day, which is organs. And when I mean organs, I'm not talking about the kind that you would throw in a pan with a bit of red wine and some onions. No, we're talking about an organ as in the musical instrument. And the Noel Iverson Memorial Organ at St. John's College is marking its 60th anniversary this year. And here to chat to me about this is Cameron Upchurch. He's the head of chapel music to chat to me about this. And Cameron, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Alex, thank you so much for having me. It's a very great pleasure to be with you.
Cameron, let's chat about this Noel Iverson Memorial Organ. What's the history of this particular instrument?
The instrument was installed in the college chapel at the end of 1964, was playable by the end of 1964, and was dedicated, blessed by the Bishop of Johannesburg in February 1965. So we've taken the date of dedication as the instrument's birthday, as it were. So we've just celebrated its 60th birthday. It was built and given in memory of Noel Iverson, who was director of music at the school from 1931 until his death in 1962.
Now, the man whose name this organ carries, I believe, was not initially in favor of an organ at all. What instrument was he in favor of, and how do you think he'd feel about the fact that he's now got an organ named after him?
That is certainly said of Noel Iverson. He was a character by all accounts, with the nickname of Stompy Iverson, because he was short,
Okay.
and also because he smoked quite a lot. So that's probably where that came from. But it is said that he preferred accompaniment by the piano alone, so that the boys' voices could be properly heard. However, it's also been said that he was interested in having an instrument put into the chapel at St. John's, but was not interested in anything that would be substandard. He was only interested in the finest quality that money could buy, which is certainly in keeping with that particular era in the school's life, where the school was intent on purchasing instruments, in this case an instrument that would be worthy of the chapel space. And after his death, there was a committee put together to start to raise funds for an instrument. So as to whether he really disliked the instrument or not, I think the jury's out about that. But yes, I think it would be quite ironic if that were indeed the case.
At one point, organs seem to have had a bit of a popularity. There's certain buildings in South Africa that just had massive organs. I'm thinking about Johannesburg Town Hall. I think the UNISA main auditorium has an organ in it. And there's probably a whole list of them that we can go through. And there seem to have been sort of this great interest in having organs in big public rooms. Why was that?
Certainly the instrument, because of its ability to fill a space, a large space, and having only one person play it, meant that it was the obvious choice for very large civic buildings, which sprang up. Obviously, the great cathedrals of Europe in particular, sport many very, very large instruments. And as civic life developed all over the world, it became almost an obvious choice, as it were, to place organs into civic buildings as well as religious buildings.
Now, there's a couple of well-known tunes that even the most unfamiliar person with an organ will know. Toccata and Fugue in D minor. You've got the opening of Phantom of the Opera, features a bit of organ music. The rest of it, it's not the most popular kind of instrument in 2025, possibly also due to its cost and also the nature of having to learn how to play it, because it seems a bit like flying a helicopter. You have to kind of use your hands and your feet all at the same time.
There's certainly an investment of time that's required on the part of the student of the instrument. You need to already have a very good keyboard facility before you start learning the instrument. So you need to be a competent pianist already before you start embarking on organ studies, because as you mentioned, the use of the feet in combination with the hands is integral to playing the instrument. So a student of the instrument needs access to an instrument as regularly as possible, which sometimes is not always the easiest thing to achieve.
And not something you can buy for home and sort of set up in your living room.
Very few people in the country who actually do have instruments in their homes, small instruments and some not so small instruments. But no, certainly it's not an obvious choice for the domestic milieu. Yeah,
at least the neighbors of the body corporate might be giving you a call every time you start playing a few tunes. But you've had the chance to play the Noel Iverson Memorial Organ, I suppose, on a few occasions. And it must be quite something being entrusted with this particular instrument that has got such an incredible history and such an incredible story to it.
I'm very privileged to be custodian of this instrument and have been playing it as chapel organist since 2004. And it's given me great pleasure over the years and has helped me develop my own playing and my own technical and artistic ability over the years. It's a very complete instrument. It sports a wonderful variety of tonal colors in it. And it certainly is a centerpiece of the school's liturgical life, which in the case of St. John's is regular. We have school masses every single week in both the college and the preparatory school.
So I believe it's got something like 2,700 pipes and can give you a unique range of sounds. It must be quite an expensive instrument to keep tuned and to keep working? Because I mean, there's probably so many different parts and so many things that can break or get dusty or get dirty that it probably has to be serviced quite regularly.
It does. And the expense is not insignificant. But if you compare the expense to 60 years of ongoing service, day in and day out, the expense is very, very well worth it. The instrument gets tuned at least 3 times a year. And if there is any other special work that needs doing, we have that done as and when we need to.
Now, you've mentioned it gets used very much in the school's sort of everyday runnings, part of festivities, part of celebrations, part of worship at the school. But do you feel that there's a bigger audience that possibly should have access to the sound and be able to appreciate this incredible instrument in terms of its history, but also in terms of the sound and the style of music that organ music is? Yes,
I do agree with that. The instrument, fortunately now in the 21st century, is not just seen as something that is solely for church or liturgical use. And its popularity as a concert instrument is also beginning to grow. And we've seen that over the last few decades with the emergence of concert organists, recitalists who travel the world playing the larger civic instruments, especially that you mentioned earlier, as well as the large instruments in the great churches and cathedrals of the world. But I think there's definitely scope in Johannesburg for us expanding the concert use of the instrument.
I mean, if we had to argue this, the value of the organ is probably priceless based on the story that it has and obviously the legacy that it has. But if you had to insure this organ, if you had to put a price to it, what is an organ going for these days? If someone's in the market for an organ,
I think it varies. It varies wildly. You can find instruments on eBay if you like. There are a number of churches, sadly, around the country and indeed in the world that are closing down or are changing their styles of worship and are looking to get rid of the existing instruments. So it depends on the size of the instrument and depends on the quality of the instrument. As far as the St. John's instrument is concerned, I don't want to get myself into trouble with the finance department and try and put a figure on anything. But certainly insurance-wise, we're looking at millions.
I can imagine. Well, the avid Cameron Upchurch, he's the head of chapel music at St. John's College, talking about the Noel Iverson Memorial Organ that celebrates its 60th anniversary this year. And Cameron, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you and catching up about this very unique and very historical piece of musical history.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation, Alex.
Connect with the Sandton Times. Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za.
Sandton Times boasts a growing motoring section, and earlier this year I had the pleasure of attending the relaunch of MG in the South African market. And MG was founded over 100 years ago by British motoring pioneers William Morris and his visionary general manager Cecil Kimber, and has always been synonymous with creating accessible sports cars. And if you fast forward to 2025, well, MG has seen a massive resurgence. It's evolved under the stewardship of SAIC Motor, the Chinese automotive giant that acquired the brand in 2007, and their influence has not only revitalized MG's R&D capabilities, but also has ensured its global footprint has grown. And in 2023, MG Motor sold approximately 840,000 vehicles globally, with 88% of sales coming from outside of China. In the UK, MG has been the fastest growing automotive brand for 2 consecutive years. And back in South Africa for the launch, I had the pleasure of chatting to Advanced Design Director at SAIC Design London, Carl Gotham. And I kicked off our chat with asking him about how intimidating it must be to design a new MG.
Yeah, it is indeed, yeah. Something that a lot of people have asked me today. I think the badge carries such a huge connection to something. It's got such a magic about it that it is a great responsibility, but it's also a great opportunity, something that really motivates and drives me as an automotive designer and somebody that's creative and trying to search for new ideas. To sort of have this brand with such rich heritage and narrative is a fantastic opportunity.
When you went into car design, did you ever think that you'd be designing a car like an MG?
Oh, no, not at all, really. I mean, when I started, so I graduated in 99, so a little bit of an indication on my age, but 99 at Coventry University, one of the UK's sort of leading, well, was the only school at the time in the UK where you could study transport design. You ask anyone that studied vehicle design, they do it because of a kind of creative passion for cars and for transport or movement and creating these objects of desire and form. So yeah, to be here with sitting in a car that I was directly responsible for is it's sort of pinch yourself moment that you don't get to do very often.
What is your favorite part when it comes to car design? What is it that excites you and gets you out of bed every morning?
Yeah, I think it's different. It's evolved a lot. The industry's changed, and cars have changed, technology's changed. But my role now is really about looking ahead. I'm very curious about people and obviously and brands and where the world is going. So sort of looking for that and then creating the space and a bit of direction for my designers, design team to go away and do what they love and do best, which is drawing, sketching, shaping ideas and products that kind of connect to something and say something.
When it comes to designing cars that stand the test of time, is it still about the actual design? I mean, does it kind of feel like everything that could be designed has been designed, or is there also a big focus on the materials that are used, more sustainable, eco-friendly, new fabrics and leathers that are coming into the market?
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on quite a few points there, and I think, cars that stand the test of time, they need to endure a lot, and actually there's an element of, let's say, simplicity that often is, if you look back at some of the iconic, they say something very clear and very strong about, they have a clear, simple, strong message. So whatever that is, whatever that particular message is, in today's world, we've got lots of brands. There are lots of new brands coming from China. There are lots of brands that have existed for decades in the West as well. So I think trying to find things that really stand out, really sit, and will hold there, into the future is still a big challenge. But yeah, we need to be more sustainable. Cars generally, so materiality, and obviously powertrains are helping to do that. But yeah, this going back to your earlier point about have we designed all the cars? Absolutely not. We haven't designed all the cars at all. There's still plenty more to come.
We're sitting in your, I'd almost say, flagship model, which is the Cyberster. Almost a little bit of a contradictory car, because on the one hand it's a roadster, but at the same time it's electric. And a lot of people would say, well, how can a roadster be a car that doesn't make noise?
Yes, and it's a great point, but I think actually as part of the magic of this car, I mean, I've obviously driven it several times. I think when you drive this car with the roof down on an open road or in a town, it's very easy to drive. That's the first thing. This is an easy sports car to drive because it's an EV. So the delivery of the power is there instantaneously. You can put a smile on your face in any situation. But actually, it's not. In this case, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to bring back a roadster, something that's absolutely unique. We've built this car and delivered it ahead of many well-known sports car makers in the world, so who are trying to, or have been trying to, race to get an electric sports car out now. Whether that will happen or not, given some of the changes in the world towards EV, but this car represents, for me, the experience of driving an MG. It's quiet, it's refined, yet it's fast, it's fun, it's easy to use. It's a good thing. So you need to get in it and drive it and experience it.
I'll take you up on that very quickly.
No problem.
But this is sort of iconic MG, what people would expect from the brand.
Yeah.
The other releases, less so. It's more of a family car, something that's a bit more sort of, call it economical, call it spacious, call it, something that is wholesome. How does that fit into this new MG DNA?
Yeah, well, I think it's important, we're trying to build a brand and a portfolio, I think, without having cars like ZS, HS, MG3, MG4, all these mainstream position products, we wouldn't be able to do a car like this. So we need to survive for the future if the brand is going to be around. So those cars are incredibly important. In today's world, that's what the majority of people want. They want cars to transport their family around in convenience and safety. So
a lot of people might say you've brought over the MG brand, but have you brought the DNA and the essence of the brand with you?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's a big question. I think there is MG DNA in the cars we're producing. Have we untapped all of the MG DNA? I don't think so yet, but we are definitely hell bent on getting there. So everything's heading in the right direction.
What can South African consumers look forward to if they step into an MG and give it a try? I
think they'll just be pleasantly surprised about where this brand has come from and what it delivers in terms of feature and experience, and the price point we're offering it. I think it should be an accessible brand. That's what we've talked about a lot. So I think. Yeah, we need to get people in the cars. Hopefully this, with the doors, with the scissor doors, I'll demonstrate them, helps to get the car noticed. So, a little bit of a flashy feature that undoubtedly, stops people in their tracks.
Absolutely. If you had to pick one of your favorite design features or one of your favorite design on one of the models, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a huge question. I think, for me, this car... This car is full of characteristics. I think what we tried to do with this car in particular, without picking on one feature, it's about creating something that is at the core a it's an emotive, desirable sports car. You look at this thing and you see it as a sports car rather than it being an EV or even an ICE. Those things go out of your mind. It doesn't really matter what the powertrain is. It's just a desirable product. So yeah, I think I'm just super happy with the overall impression of this product.
That was Advanced Design Director at SAIC Design London, Carl Gotham, chatting about the launch of MG back into South Africa. And if you want some more information, all you have to do is hop onto the website, www.sandtontimes.co.za. Some great photos, some great videos, and further reading on that particular launch. And with that, it's all we have time for this week on the Sandton Times Hour. But it all carries on online. If you want to have another listen, or if you missed something, or you'd want to share some of the interviews, you can do so by hopping onto one of the various podcast platforms: Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Podcast Party, Iona FM, and so many more. And check it out there. Subscribe, follow, do all those good things. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za or connect on social media @Sandton Times. Hop onto the website at www.sandtontimes.co.za. And of course, use the exclusive WhatsApp line 084 Sandton. That's 084 726 3866, 084 726 3866. And feel free to send through your voice notes, text messages, and more. And who knows, we might just feature it on the show in the coming weeks. Thank you to all the guests who made time to be on the show this week, and of course also the team that has pulled this all together beautifully, and I think it's been a great and seamless transition into 2025, for which I'm eternally grateful, and also well wishes for a speedy recovery to all those who caught up in that horrible shooting in Sandton this week. Thank you for listening, and God willing, we'll do it all again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Sandton Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.